All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Liquid Weekly podcast. I'm your host, Karl Meisterheim. With me, as always, is the amazing Taylor Page. Taylor, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
We are here to talk about all things Shopify development. And if you've ever been in the space of needing to develop a theme, you know there's 1,000 things you have to consider. Brought in this special guy. You may have heard of him already because he just spoke a moment ago, but Thomas Kelly of Archetype Themes is here to talk with us all about theme development and an exciting thing they've been working on called DevKit. So Thomas, thank you for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Karl. Hello, Taylor.
Hello, Thomas. Thank you for coming.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
I've been looking forward to this I feel like this has been on my mind, and now that we're actually doing it, the timing couldn't be better. So
Worked out. We were trying to get
Good.
you for season 1, but you were too busy. Schedules
Good
never
things
lined
take
up
time.
for us, so we got you. But the timing's good for this time.
All right. So Thomas, tell us a little bit about yourself and Archetype and just give us some context for people that are joining us.
Yeah. My name's Thomas. I am the CEO of a company called Archetype Themes. Archetype is one of, if not the largest premium theme producer on Shopify. You can find us straddling the number 1 and sometimes the number 2 most popular theme on the theme store. We've got that nice little competition with Maestro going on for the number 1 position, depending on the time of the month that you check. Maybe we're number 1 or maybe we're number 2. And for those of you who don't know what premium themes are, is that Shopify, when you join, you have a default free theme. There's a collection of free themes available to you. And if you want something different than that, then there are third-party partners, theme partners in the Shopify ecosystem that create themes and sell them on the theme store. So that allows you to have something a little bit more bespoke, something different than the default, also additional features. It's up to each theme partner to figure out what they want to offer as that additional value. And then myself, I've been in the Shopify space. I was hired at Shopify in 2015 for the Shopify Themes team and worked on the themes platform and free themes. Narrative was my baby free theme that came out when I was that I produced while at Shopify. Held a number of positions in online store and theme, always around themes, up until 2021, in which I jumped and took another angle to themes, which is running and growing a theme business outside of Shopify. So, as we like to say here, always down to talk about themes. You know, there's just so many different angles that we can talk about it. So let's just dive in.
Yeah, I'm super excited because I'll be honest, obviously most people's experience as a developer with Shopify tends to start in the theme space. I've always found that would be a little baffling because I'm, as I already hinted earlier, more of a back-end app kind of guy, right? And so having someone that actually understands, like, why is it the way it is, is nice. So I'm looking forward to asking a bunch of questions because I have a lot of them.
I would love that. The context of just how things have evolved and changed and people who arrive to it now, there's a lot of decisions and just iterations and layers that have been applied over the years that there's definitely the stories. I'll be curious what we get into.
Yeah, well, Taylor, do you have an initial question? Should I just jump in with mine? I know we got an outline here, but
Let's say we've got a little bit of an outline, and it was an impressive intro, and I'm surprised, especially because we're talking about DevKit. I don't know if I'm going to be a little bit forward here, but you kind of glossed over two topics. I know originally you had a pretty big hand in Slate, right, back in the day, and you totally missed that. So I don't know if that's because we didn't want to get too deep into the weeds as far as what that was, but that wasn't even a big part of your narrative intro there, which I'm surprised it didn't make the cut. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, this is in the many angles of themes. Yeah,
so you've done so many
over.
things. So
it was developer tooling with Slate that started. Like Slate V0 was the themes team. Like there was a bunch of us working on it. By V1, which is what really picked up. I was soloing that for over a year. That is so much fun. I love dev tooling, which we're gonna be kind of theme.
Well, that's kind of why I didn't want to get too ahead, but that's when we talked about DevKit, and we're going to talk about that much more extensively, obviously. this kind of like made me think of, oh, like this is kind of what I think people were hoping Slate would blossom into. I don't know if that's off to say that or something like that, if that's even part of the original goals, plans, or designs or what have you. But obviously, I didn't know if like your influence early on with trying to get Slate up and off the ground into more like grand adoption is kind of what led to, like, hey, like this is actually how in today's theme environment, DevKit's actually a better solution, really.
I definitely took all of the learnings and things that I wanted to continue doing with me from Shopify, and it's definitely very present in what's going on at Archetype now. There's nuance to it, which we'll dig into, because there's parts of Slate that we were able to ship as part of OS 2, like in Shopify CLI, and like do we want to get into this? I know, Karl, you had
that's why I didn't want to get too far ahead. I was like, I don't know. This is my big thing. I wanted to ask Thomas. So
pin
let's
that,
get into
because there's some good stories there. Yeah.
We'll get into it, because I do have a question for you, Thomas, that's related to all this. Don't worry, Taylor. I think, first of all, one insight, like you mentioned at the beginning, you were like the sole developer on Slate. I think it's interesting, those of us that are in developer shops, like you can perceive something on the internet and like, oh, there must be a whole team behind this thing that Shopify is doing from the company. Sometimes it's just one guy. Sometimes that one guy is just Thomas. It's kind of easy to forget that sometimes in terms of how we interact with that in the space. But the question I had, Thomas, is if I'm remembering the history correctly, like Slate was sort of heralded. It was kind of set up for success. And then people kind of stopped talking about it, people being like Shopify and whatnot. And there was a period of time I remember where it kind of felt like, well, do you use Slate or do you not use Slate? Like, what's the deal? And then I feel like new messaging came out more around like CLI and like Slate's still here, but don't use it kind of thing. Were you still, first of all, is that accurate? And then were you still at Shopify when that transition happened? And how did you feel about it, given that Slate was kind of your baby?
Yeah. So it was started as, well, the inception of it is very similar to DevKit. Actually, that we as a themes team had our tooling set up that we use to create free themes. And it was, well, this really helps us. This provides a solid workflow. Let's open source this. Let's make this available to the community. And that was really Slate v0. If you can go back further in this, I think it's the same repo, into the v0 version, which is gulp based, and it's a bunch of gulp scripts and uses oh my god, theme kit to sync the files. Wow, I can't believe I stumbled on that. That's Tim Anima's gonna kill me if he sees that.
We're all trying to move on from theme kits, so we've embraced this Shopify CLI.
That's a whole theme kit's a whole other. I mean, similar kind of story of navigating Shopify. So how things unfolded, that Slate v1, there's a lot of people at Shopify's never going to suffer from a lack of things to do. There is just so many things that could be done, and the hardest thing all the way from the top down is what are just the most important things that we can be working on.
Right.
And so even though we were a themes team of 10, 12, online store in general grew from, when I joined, we were about 10 of us to over 60, 80 people, probably over 100 actually.
Wow.
But it's just so many different projects that when you get into something like developer tooling, at that given point, the kind of what was set up, who was hired, where resources had to go, I was ended up being the one person on Slate. And there's a lot of details that led to, like, details of just resourcing, of the approach to it. It worked, but there was still a lot left to desire. It took the platform, the Shopify platform in the current state, and really pushed it to its limits, and maybe did a lot of solutioning where it would have been better to do some of the solutioning in Ruby in Shopify core. It was doing it in developer tooling with Webpack, with a build phase. different views on that. Just call it like a political landscape slash there's a secret sauce to projects that go on in larger companies. In Shopify, I'm hearing the same with Google, with any of these larger companies, that it's not just one thing that can lead to its demise, or in this case, I was soloing it, and then came the time that there was a push for performance. And while I was doing developer tooling, I was also the largest advocate for performance on themes and online store. And so I was given the option, do I continue with developer tooling, or do I jump on and lead the performance initiatives for online store? And performance felt like the bigger choice. So
Sure.
that, and then the call was, okay, what are we going to do with Slate? And the rest is history.
Mm-hmm.
It's still abbreviated version of the story, but it
Provides a lot of
ultimately,
context, though. Definitely.
yeah,
It kind of lines up. Mm-hmm.
it's this. I think it's really easy. I did this with Google while I was at Shopify. It's really easy to look at a company that you admire or that's bigger than you, and just see it as they've got everything together, and they've got so many people, and they're not working on this thing, and they're just like, how could they miss this? Everyone at these companies is the same as you and I. Like, we're all just humans trying to do the best thing, and that was my experience with Google as well. I was like, oh, Google's like just taking them off the pedestal. It was like, it's the exact same as Shopify.
Right. It's always people behind the actual much larger machine. And like you had mentioned too, there's only so much that, Shopify has to pick, like, what is the most important thing. Same thing as individual people who have ownership of these different projects, right? You have to pick at a certain point. You come to these crossroads, and you get people online all the time saying, oh, why doesn't Shopify build this in, or build this in, or build this in? It's just like, well, I mean, they could, but it's not. Well, it's not maybe the most important thing.
It's so the most recent example is the inlining SVG assets, or inline assets filter. That is a case where a flag was raised and something was shipped in 2 or 3 weeks. There's so many cases that this has happened at Shopify.
Yep.
This is amazing to see that such a large business can come together and ship something quickly like that. Whenever this happens, everyone's external reaction is always, wow, this is amazing. And I think after it ships, the team feels amazing. But with that kind of unprompted, let's ship it really quick, internally, like, there's a lot going on that you're throwing away a roadmap, or like you have to pivot and adjust like other plans that are already in motion. You have to like, it's not just simple as find the thing, put people on it, fix it, move on. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that just so, because when you do that, like, it takes people by surprise, and like if you do that a lot, then like people start to get anxious, like, oh, when am I going to be surprised again? And then you go into workplace culture, and you go into like, you can take it in so many different angles. So it's about a balance, I guess. It's being fast but still stable and thoughtful, and
So Slate's demise was because you moved on to performance work?
Yeah. And then I went on paternity leave. was the other one. Which Slate's demise was that, but then with the online store 2.0 push, I was able to use what I learned in Slate to actually fuel a lot of the improvements that we saw in Online Store 2.0. Particularly dev themes was one I can point to the issue in Slate where I was like, I had so many issues of people working with Slate and then wanting to share that version that they're working on with a coworker, but that version is pointing to localhost. Like, it was reading JS from localhost and CSS from localhost. So when they shared the preview, it wouldn't work for other people. And it was like, oh, wouldn't it be great if while I'm developing, this is in a non-visible theme, that like invisible dev theme. And so that was why we have dev themes now. Another point was the setup and authentication. The friction there was ThemeKit setting up a custom API key, getting it copied into the config. It was like couldn't get it below 10 steps kind of thing, which that was the Shopify CLI having browser login, so that now you can just auth by opening up the browser window, and now you're auth to edit the files on the store. The Shopify GitHub integration, that also came from Slate. That was this is it would be awesome to have a way to sync the repo. There was a lot of learning, so it wasn't all lost. There was definitely progress made from it.
Yeah, like the larger project itself kind of died off, but there were so many like smaller developer niceties now that we enjoy and are super grateful for, that it helped kind of lead the way.
It was a good push with OS2.
So tell us more about this DevKit thing. It sounds like a spiritual successor to Slate in some regards.
Yeah. So for those who, I'll give a little bit of background on what we're talking about when I say DevKit. So Archetype Themes, I joined in 2021. Archetype Themes, our product is themes in the theme store, which at the end of the day, this is a zip of liquid files, CSS, JS, and SVGs now. Well, it was liquid, but yeah. A zip of static text files that together, when you upload this to Shopify, this is a theme. Ultimately, this is a product that is packaged and uploaded to Shopify and distributed in a way that is targeting merchants. That this product is displayed and is the way that it's formatted and that it's uploaded and run on a store is made for a store owner to take it, install it, use it with the theme editor, and that's where it came from, and it's a product for merchants. The funny thing is that there's a lot of merchants that want customizations on their theme. There's a lot of agencies that are making custom themes for merchants. There are a lot of developers who take these theme zips, this product that's packaged for merchants, and work with that in a developer as a developer product. They work with that essentially compiled code, because that zip is not our source code. It goes through a build process because we don't want to work with that zip. Would you work with like a compiled SAS, or would you? You can't even work with most compiled code. It's just kind of a side effect that when we compile the code, we leave it readable enough so that in the online code editor, that we don't minify files, for example. Sometimes themes provide an optional minified version. Well, now it's no need because Shopify minifies it on the fly. Point being, developers are using a product that is for merchants to develop and customize themes. Why? Why does this exist? Why does this have to, this just doesn't make sense. Anyone who builds themes full time does not work with these files. Why should you, as somebody who's not part of these companies? Or why should you need to invest an exorbitant amount of time and expertise to build your own source code, your own starting point, figure out all the tools that are needed for you to be able to do this workflow productively? What is the developer environment? Because the Shopify CLI really just gives you file syncing and live reloading of the files that are formatted, again, for merchant, for the upload, not necessarily the ideal dev experience. And so it's there's lots of people that have already figured out what is the developer experience, what are the workflows to maintain 10, 20, 50 stores with this one theme. All these challenges that aren't necessarily standardized at Shopify's level. There's still lots of room for interpretation or how you want to approach it. People who have been doing it long enough have figured it out, but anyone that's new to the game is like, well, where the hell do I even start? And so Archetype, already, like, it was founded by ex-Shopify employees. It's run and still has. There's 4 of us Shopify alumni at Archetype right now. We know, both from working at Shopify and having worked with theme partners, we know, and agencies, we have a good sense of what a workflow, of what tooling can be. Also, what would this look like if Shopify did it? Even better. We'll go into that further, but you don't need to figure this out. What you're trying to do is build this theme. You're trying to provide a service to the merchant. You're not trying to build a tooling stack. You're not trying to, like, that's just a side effect of what you're trying to do. So you shouldn't need to be reinventing the wheel when there's been so many other people that have figured this out. So DevKit is ultimately what is public right now. At the core belief of this is that how we build themes should be open. Like, this shouldn't be a trade secret. That everyone benefits when we align on the best way of building things. That the merchants win, developers win. Open source has already proven this value. That, like, we only get better and better solutions if we can riff off the last thing that was made. It was Slate too. The Slate v0 was one thing, and then it kind of went in the back burner for a while. Somebody created a repo called Slater, which was then being let go of, and that was when I jumped in Slate v1. I grabbed that and combined it and augmented that. Like, the open source is beautiful. So how we build themes doesn't need to live and die within a company. There's so many agencies that have done stuff similar to us. And the biggest problem here is that it stays private. It doesn't leave the silo. And there's just so much tribal knowledge and expertise that exists in people's brains that just never makes it out to the broader community. So that's what's live right now. And people, it's going to look different by the time this podcast goes out. But that's the open source initiative side of DevKit. And what we're talking about even further today is is it just an open source thing? No, there is a business angle to this for Archetype. We're not just doing this out of goodwill.
What?
I think that's one of the failures of open source is, well, one of the cruxes of open source is how can this be sustained? Ultimately, like, this is people's time. You need money. So either you get sponsored to get money to pay people to make a living, or you build a business out of it.
Well, I'm sure, does that address kind of the perspective too that you've probably seen, that I've heard a lot of times too, where people see, oh, this is free. This means that as soon as Archetype gets bored with it, it's going to go away, right? Like, if you create a business model around it of some degree, they know it's going to be sustainable. So essentially, you're helping encourage adoption because you're showing a path forward for the future too.
All of these, there's so many. I'd say one of the biggest learnings from Slate and just when you start working with developers, you realize how much trust is at the core of any developer product. It's trust that you're not going to push breaking changes without announcing, or even frequently. Like, you're going to be smart about pushing breaking changes, and you're going to, like, speak like a developer and not like a marketing person that's trying to be a developer. Like, there's so many parts of this that lead to, like, yeah, I'm down to build my business, build my solutions around this thing because I trust that it is a good solution. So yeah, I think a big part of that for this not to just be a passion project is, and this is what makes it serious for us, is this is a new product line for Archetype that, going back to what that theme store themes, the theme zip, that is a product for merchants. It's packaged and distributed for merchants. And even more, I would argue the priority there is convenience. That like you build that to be as convenient as possible. Developers, maybe they don't care as much about convenience. They want configurability. They want flexibility. They want to be able to work with this thing, manipulate it, use it, do whatever they want. Like, so configurability is a priority there. And that's DevKit. That now we can separate convenience and merchant product from developer-oriented product, and provide developers what they actually need to build and maintain custom themes for their clients, whether you're in-house engineering, whether you're an agency, whether you're a solo developer. This is what we're diving into with DevKit. And we can take it from so many different angles from there, but that's the teaser, let's say.
That was the quick intro, right, of DevKit.
Very quick intro.
It's a quick intro. Well, so you touched on this, like high level, what DevKit is. We talked a little bit about that. There is a business model. There's a pathway forward. Do you want to talk about the business plan for DevKit a little bit? Maybe more specifically as far as, we've got very big picture, what DevKit is trying to do. Do you want to get into like what DevKit actually is and kind of like ping around that, or do you want to get into the business plan side of things, knock that out so we can go deeper on the other side?
Let's start super high level, or like we'll work our way down. So we're at we're creating a product for developers. Is it just some open source repos? No. The open source portion of it that we've released the preview of is really that addressing the how we build something should not be a trade secret. And we want this to be as collaborative as possible. We want the living spec of the ideal way of building themes to be available to anyone. So then what's the product side of it? What's the part that we can build a whole revenue stream around that's going to make sure that this continues to live and makes it a solid business? Ultimately, this spec that we've been building we have a preview of it open source, but our themes, Expanse, Gem, Fetch, and another one that's in development was supposed to go out this summer and is doing more iterations, other story, are all built to this spec. And so what if you, instead of just getting the zips of these themes, you could have access to Archetype source code and our workflows and our tooling, and like all the tooling that's available open source, but applied and ready for you to use in GitHub to fork, to So instead of purchasing Expanse and just working with the zip, you still need to purchase. We can get into pricing. We can get into that at some point, but you still need to purchase a theme, because effectively when you're purchasing a theme, this is a mental shift. You're not really buying the code. You're buying a license to run the code in production. The software, you're rarely buying the code. The IP still belongs to Archetype. You're buying a license to run it. So we still need to have that Shopify to be able to track who has a license, who does not. But instead of now customizing or starting a theme project from scratch, you can start from a component library that has 80% of what you need, let's say. And now your project comes from what's the 20% that I need to build for this client, or less, like maybe everything you need is there already. But what I have the source code, I have the tooling, I have everything that Archetype uses, that the spec is open source, that the community is backing. This is a collaborative effort that's really close to the Shopify platform, with the goal that Shopify is adopting more and more of these practices because we're proving how great they are. And you can focus on building the themes that you need to build for your client and not figuring out how to build them. That's the high level pitch.
Nice. So when we talk about, I do a lot of this, I refer to it often as extending themes. Okay, right?
Yeah.
So themes have this out of the box, like you said, this is a merchant facing product. Someone's like, I want X, Y, and Z done or whatever. And so that's why I'll often refer to this as like extending a theme, right? Because I'm not like, recreating something from scratch, right? I'm taking something that's already mostly built out. We're pushing a little bit further kind of type thing as far as what they need specific to their brand. And so someone like me doesn't usually get into, there's this weird back and forth with people when they talk about, I have a custom theme. I'm talking to a client, right? Or whatever. So a freelancer works on themes and like, I have a custom theme. I need X, Y, and Z done. And I pop in there. I'm like, oh, like you're running Impulse. Like you don't have a custom theme. You have a customized theme, or, what I again refer to as we've extended this theme, right? And so, but like at least the way that it sounds, this does sound like a way agencies, freelancers, what have you, or whatever, could actually really use DevKit to build up. They're still gonna have to purchase a license, but they could essentially build a pretty custom theme that maybe gets further away from what Expanse, Impulse, or something along those lines would eventually be. Would you say that's how I'm kind of like hearing that at the moment? Do you think that that's accurate?
I would say it's anywhere from basic extensions done in a reliable way that then you can continue to receive updates from Archetype as we push bug fixes, as we push updates to themes or to components. It's really changing the whole mental model that when all of our cognitive function is being pooled into a central component library instead of being dispersed across theme projects. Now anything that we're doing lands in a component library, and you'll be able to update your theme with the latest version of components before we push a theme release for it.
That's awesome.
And even then, updating a theme without the source code is a whole other, anyone who's tried to update themes knows that there's an art, there's a craft, there's always asterisk this, asterisk that.
There's a very manual process, yes.
Having the GitHub, having the workflow really laid out with the GitHub integration, you have the source code and the commits. So your work, all of this has been already solved by Git. Why do you have to now work through a zip and unversioned files? If you have the source code, you can do everything that developers already know how to do. Mm-hmm. So it is anywhere from, it's more the essence of, if you buy a theme from Archetype, it's backed by this developer environment that is accessible to any developer that wants access to it. So if you're working with an Archetype theme, there's an incentive for you to have access to that developer environment. So any changes you do, or if you're setting up a store, you're able to sell that as an additional feature to the client. And don't worry, I'm building in this way that it's open source. Here's the spec that's documented. Here, anyone, even if I fall off the face of the earth, this product has got your back. Another developer can jump in and all the dots will already be there. And there's an insurance policy kind of beyond it of just how to build high quality theme projects. Let's just call it that. Yeah. So it can be anywhere from just extending that you can work, instead of needing to isolate things in a custom JS file, you could fork the components and extend components to what you need, or you could just keep the customizations in another file. You have the full source code, you do whatever you want, and you have the commits to diff. Yeah. So you can do extensions in non-hacky ways, let's just say, or you can totally build a whole other theme with these. This is how we build themes. The new theme Vino that will be in the theme store at some point is built on components, and it is doing this exact practice of, we have our component library. We need this is the level that's been changed. What's the 20% that we need to make it different enough? Shopify is saying that 20% is enough. So now it's what's the 40% that we need for it to be different enough? And build that. And that way you can reuse what works, and you extend what needs to be extended, and you build new stuff that's not there at all. It's all just centralized in components.
No, I like that, because at least, and I've referenced Impulse a couple times because I worked on Impulse a bit this week to extend out a feature for a client that I was working with. And so a great example, you talked about just being able to update seamlessly and those sorts of things, kind of getting notifications and those sorts of things. Was I did run into an instance where, collection filters were not supporting Boolean types. And so I ran, because I had an earlier version of Impulse, it had been long enough or whatever, we were implementing this or whatever. I was like, why the heck isn't this working? So I tracked this down for a little bit. wrote my own thing, but then I went and checked. I was like, I'm gonna ping Thomas and let him know that, like, what the heck, guys, like, you could, and of course in the current version it was supporting, and I had a much older version back, but if I had something like DevKit, I'd have been made aware very quickly, like, hey, this got updated, like, time to update my components, kind of type thing, and that would have been much more seamless than the time that I lost trying to track down why X, Y, and Z wasn't happening there. So I could immediately see just from this week something that was like, oh, like that, this now makes sense, right?
This, like, for me, this touches on a developer changelog, that what we can ship as part of the theme is release notes, and that is displayed to merchants. And we can't necessarily go into the same level of detail that would be useful for a developer there. So just having this having these changes recorded, we can point to the PR or the commit where this actual, here's the code that changed. By having that source code available, I think this is just opening a lot of doors for, in the same way that Dawn being open source, that was another big put. I could say that from Slate to, like, we need to open source. So the fact that Dawn is open source is another big kind of learning from, open source is worth it. Dawn has been able, people have been able to see the changes, have been able to work with Dawn in new ways compared to when it was all just a theme zip available for download. And in the working of how to structure this DevKit in a way that makes sure that the theme won't get pirated more, that theme store exclusivity remains because we can only sell through the theme store. I originally wanted to make components totally open source. Would be my dream would for this all to be not in private repos, for it to be public repos, because at the end of the day, as long as you can enforce the license, which we went back to, you're not purchasing the code, you're just purchasing the license. As long as that can be enforced, then it doesn't really matter where you get the code from. That's just a distribution question. In order to, this is a collaborative effort. So the middle ground that we found is that we can still make everything accessible through Git. You can still have access to all these repos. It's just you're invited to these private repos. So it's not available, which it works out for the better in some other ways too. So, but it's all in. I think the focus here is this is all in GitHub. Sorry, this is take all the workflows or your knowledge of working in GitHub, and that's your theme developer environment, along with a Shopify CLI plugin that extends the very minimal build layer that we need just to make it work. And a goal there is to really make it explicit. These are just it's mostly just copying and pasting files is what this build step is. And post CSS to combine CSS into one file, because that, as much as I want to get rid of that, is still needed. Developer experience available.
So I'm a simple man, and I code in simple languages that God intended for us to use, like Ruby. But one of the perennial problems I feel like we face with theme development is what you alluded to a few moments ago. How do third-party developers, third-party being like not part of the merchant's team or not part of the themes team, how do they correctly and professionally handle customizations, enhancements, things that are asked for in a way that doesn't completely bork the theme or make it unupgradable? It feels like a tough nut to crack, right? And as a developer, a seasoned developer, there's a right way to do this, especially on back-end code is clearer to me. I've never quite figured out how well to do it in theme code. How do you feel like DevKit addresses that issue now? And do you feel like you've cracked that question in the way that you're approaching it?
I think there's a few layers of solutions that you can approach it from. And yes, success here is that this is crystal clear. Because if there's a pain point in themes right now, it's customization, totally borking upgradability, and then you're off the upgrade path and then dealing with it. It's never going to be, well, no, it's not never. It's a challenge to incorporate customizations to places that aren't made to be customized and then keep it on. Like, that is a challenge in any code base. Git and Git conflicts and Git merge has solved this, for at least there's still a skill in terms of merging conflicts and resolving conflicts. So you can take this from just, if you have the Git history with the GitHub integration with commits, then if you have the source code with the changes, the incoming changes, then you can resolve customizations with Git. And most of us are, well, I would assume any developer working now is working with Git. Now, I think that's kind of the universal. And dealing with conflicts, that is call it the brute force, just relying on the fundamental way of of resolving any customization. I think from there, it's about presenting clear interfaces between what is easier to customize and upgrade, and like what's going to be changing more and what's going to be changing less in upgrades, and where is it safer or to apply customizations, and where is it less safe, or where will it maybe be more work to upgrade. And that goes down to architecture, in my opinion. The way that we've architected.
It's a verb.
No,
It's
a verb. We've archetyped the way that we've architected components. This has been there's so many ways of approaching this, but I really think we've nailed it. I've been thinking about this for a while, and even just in the execution of this, it's unfolded that there is we've established a very clear line between what is a theme and what are components. And that if you want to be editing, modifying components, if you can be working with the component files, there's an interface between components and then installing components on a theme. So that allows you to, as long as that interface doesn't change, which I don't know if that's too much in the weeds, the interface being like the parameters that are used for snippets, that like when in a theme project, you are using this component by calling render this snippet and passing it the variables. As long as that doesn't change, then you can be upgrading the contents of the component however you want. That's the beautiful part. Like this applies to APIs. As long as the interface remains, and this is in a sense the developer interface, that we can now make it clear, here is the developer interface. And as long as this doesn't change, you can change whatever the contents are and make it do whatever you want inside. And then if you do change the interface, if you add a parameter, or if you remove a parameter or change how a parameter works, it's a breaking change. So then you need to modify that on where the component is used in the theme. All this to say is that with these layers, you've got, if you want to customize things by building out or extending components, you have a layer to do that within components. And then at a theme project level, if you have theme A project and theme B project that are both using these components, it's up to each theme to decide how they want to configure and use those components. So there's a layer of configuration and customization available at the theme level, which this looks like, I go back to buttons. Say we have a button component, and this button component is able to show a square button or a round button. That's a basic configuration of a button. Theme A sets that parameter to square. Theme B sets that parameter to round, both using the same component. What if I want the user to be able to decide if it's round or square? Then instead of that value being static, you set it to a theme editor setting. And now you can let the merchant decide how that component is configured. So that's another layer of configuration that you have where if you control the theme project, then you can be applying customizations at that level. And then finally, there is I don't have access to components, or I don't want to work at the components level. I don't want to work at the theme level. I just want to, this is a per store edit instance that I'm coming in and just want to provide. For me, that is about having JS events that publishing and subscribing to JS events that you can hook on to relevant events. In addition, those events being tested on the component end so that they're reliable, so that we don't break them at some update. You can rely that these events that are documented, hopefully standardized, and that everyone's loving this list of events can plug into. This is about design tokens. Again, well documented, accessible. You can tweak this design token to what you need in the custom.css file or in your custom.js file. And you can apply a per store instance of a theme customization at that level, which I think each level you go up, it becomes hard. Maybe the final level is you edit the source code, or like you edit the theme zip contents at the per store level, which like that's going to be the hardest to upgrade, which is what everyone's doing right now. And then you try to push people to the easier, or like the less hacky way. How do you describe this? The like the green path. The
Less
green
hacky
path edits
is the go-to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Lots of thought.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun. That's really good. And we're actually getting near to the end of our time to discuss this topic. But Taylor, do you want to dig into this anymore? You have some specific questions?
Well, I mean, as far as I want to make sure we hit anything that Thomas for sure wants to talk about with DevKit. We're going to include obviously all the links associated with DevKit. We've talked about business plan and some of the inner workings and those sorts of things. But if you're if I'm talking to a developer, who's I'm assuming, since we're all, this is developer experience we're focused on as far as like kind of getting this all up and done. But what's the main, like when I'm talking to people about DevKit, I've obviously got my own personal like, oh hey, like I see the real value in this here. But what are the main things you want to talk to about that, aside from anything else that you want to hit before we kind of like start to transition a bit here?
So I would say from why as a developer should you choose this, we go back to, you don't need to be figuring out tooling. You don't need to be starting a project from scratch. You can you can literally fork the components repo. You'll have access to our theme repos. You can fork these and start from a solid foundation at the very least. That like this does not make sense to start from scratch. Your intro, Karl, with the checklist to go through everything that's involved in producing a high quality website these days is huge. You look from performance, from accessibility, from Shopify's like theme store requirements. That list is huge in itself. That like why should a client be paying for you to redo that is the real question. That's just not good business. And that way you can focus on the things that is specific to that client, like this custom section that allows the buyer to choose through this like survey, I don't know, like custom PDP variant selector, or this unique artistic kind of homepage product display that is in a current component. Like you can spend time on the things that really brings value for that particular project. From a business model side, I think the big appeal here, and what's really fun from how do we structure this, what's a pricing model, and something that I'm having a lot of fun with, is we need to keep one-time purchases. One of the biggest thing of any agency or any repeat buyer of ours is like, hey, we want to buy 10 themes. Can we get a bulk discount? And our answer is no, sorry, we're not selling the theme. Shopify is selling the theme, and they don't provide us the ability to apply discounts, or like we really just we can set a price and that's it. If you're paying a subscription to access our developer environment and all the everything that comes with DevKit, which will be, and to your point, in your link, you'll be able to see all the features in exhaustion of what's available, and the pricing will be there. But now that we have two revenue streams from you from a per project base and from a reoccurring base. How can we play with that? And so that what I want to do and what will be reflected, I'm like, I've got most of it figured out at this point. Final little details. But it's, if you are a subscriber, probably it's only going to be available to annual subscribers. That if you are an annual subscriber to DevKit, then each theme purchase that you make adds it kind of like a buy one, get one free, or buy 10, get one free, or you get a rebate for each theme that you purchase, so that when your subscription renews, we're able to apply that rebate to your DevKit subscription renewal.
Nice.
And the way that this looks, and what makes sense so far, is I'm looking at, if you are a solo developer and if you ship one project a month, so 12 themes in a year, so your project, you're absorbing the cost of the per theme, you will get DevKit for free, is how this pricing model will essentially work. That if you're shipping projects, if you're doing business, then DevKit won't cost you anything. And that also works with this model with, if you're a duo, you get into team pricing with 2 people, but it still works. 2 people, if they ship 12 projects in a year, will get DevKit for free. And this is all extending. There is the launch to go public on this, but this is where my head's at. And yeah, this whole subsidizing, being able to provide a bulk discount on theme purchases because you're also paying for this other thing. We have this ability to play with pricing, which is really interesting, which is a first. So I think that's an appeal as well. You're going to be getting way more. You're not just getting the theme, you're getting a developer environment, and you are getting a discount for purchasing more themes. So overall, there is a significant savings.
Nice. Well, Karl, you're muted. Let's say I'll hop in while you're muted here. One last little thought that I did have, as far as this is derailing a little bit, but I did want to ask this before we hopped off or what have you. But like, there's, especially in the Shopify app community, so we're talking mainly about theme devs here, right, and stuff like this or whatever. And I'm surprised Karl hasn't barged in here to pipe up for the app devs. So I'll do it for him. But there's been a lot of back and forth, with how difficult it is, to work in apps directly within themes. And so I think that there's some alignment here. I don't know if you want to make note of that, as far as like the alignment or push that DevKit is going to move towards, as far as like, standardization, or really pushing forward the ability for this to be easier, if not easier, at least more realistic, for accurately hooking into themes. I don't know if you want to like make a quick note about that before we hop off here. I know I should have brought that up earlier.
I'm so happy you brought that up. There's a
I know
whole other
I should have brought it up earlier. I'm sorry.
No. There's so, I mean, just the fact you're saying we're running out of time. So I'm like, but there's so much more we could talk about, and there's going to be so much time to talk about all this stuff. But love everything we've talked about. I'm happy you brought up app development. So that this does go into that customization interface that I like. This was something that I explored in narrative, that the docs weren't able to get out properly, but at least internally we had this separating, basically, here's the theme code and here's how you extend. Like jQuery had figured this out, this is how you extend jQuery, or like any framework, kind of like, don't touch the jQuery.js file, don't edit that, but here you can modify, you can extend jQuery, you can do everything you want with jQuery, just extend it, don't modify it. So for me, this goes into having the right events to plug into as an app, having the design tokens that you can access, read from. What's great about CSS variables is they're readable from JS as well. So you can reliably access, and the more that we can standardize these, to King's point, to like, there's so many threads going on, the more that we have some kind of standard interface that themes provide, the easier that it is for any apps to be integrating. And that is like why this needs to be open source. That's a great example. The other side that I'm really excited that you brought this up, because I would never have mentioned it. Big part of components. So we're introducing just theme components, and this really is a whole other layer to theme. This is not theme development. Component development is a thing in itself. And in that, the way that components are structured and the way that we're approaching components is that you can develop a component in isolation. It can be loaded. It has all the resources that it needs just to be loaded just by itself.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need a theme project, or it doesn't need to be. The whole point of this is that instead of working in this monolithic theme project, huge theme projects are huge if you look at kind of the number of features and everything that you're working with. Not huge compared to, I don't know, like Shopify core, but like there's still big projects. You can now just focus on this one piece that you're building out. What that also translates to is theme blocks or app blocks. Online store app extensions are essentially that. So you could use this component development environment to develop your online app extension as a component, and your online app extension just renders that snippet, and that snippet includes includes everything that you need.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't built an online store app extension since it's been a year since I touched it, a year and a bit now. The last time I touched it, the developer experience was not good, non-existent. Almost like, is it still non-existent basically? Like,
I don't know. I don't touch apps all that much. I'm a themes guy. I know it's
that.
I think your point is, yes, it's still kind of
like you can't theme development is established that you can, at least with Shopify CLI, push the theme files, view it. My understanding with online store app extensions is you basically need to follow a theme development workflow, preview a snippet, preview your assets inside of a theme project, and then you copy and paste that into your online store app extension, because these are just theme files that you're working with, but it's like the development environment is separate from the deployment environment, or it's very hard to just preview something. That I think with this ability to develop something in isolation, it directly translates to how an online store app extension is loaded as well.
Nice.
So I'm really excited for that, and I would love for people to get in and be tinkering on that side of things and telling us what they need. And this is what I'm so excited about this, why this is happening now, why we're having this podcast, and we're about to launch the early access to this. And we've taken this at least as far as we're comfortable taking it without external input, looking at the minute details of our code. Now it's time for people to tell us what they want and what they need. And it's just going to help our momentum. It's going to help make sure that we're prioritizing the biggest. There's so many things we could be working on, but like, what do you guys need is right. What we're shifting to. Yeah.
It's awesome. Getting to the important stuff.
That's a great segue to wrap up our conversation around DevKit. Not that we're done with you, Thomas, but if people do want to get in touch with you and give you that feedback that you're asking for, what's the best way for them to do that?
So if you are a subscriber to DevKit, there's going to be a whole internal members feedback. Well, it's all in GitHub. So it's going to be, you create issues, you can start discussions, everything we've already figured out in terms of GitHub workflow will apply here. Yes. You have your fork that you can be working in. You can be creating issues for any bugs or any requests that you have. Yeah, not reinventing the wheel there. Outside of that, we have our open source repos. There's the discussion board there. We've closed issues because issues in this sense are just going to hang forever. And I think the discussions work better in this case. So we have the discussions board. Also, Twitter, DM, what else? Slack, theme partners, Slack is also an option. There's so many. Yeah.
Gonna say LinkedIn, but I noticed that my request to connect with you is still pending.
LinkedIn is definitely noisier for me. That's I will go through my requests. I'm definitely LinkedIn. I'm not as on top of the DMs. I would say that's just
A lot more to wade through in there. So
choosing where to put my focus, I guess. But LinkedIn should be a legitimate way. Yeah, I do. It can still work. Yeah, but I also haven't really locked down from a DM message side.
We'll include all those links to get in touch with Thomas, and
maybe my
as
SDA
well as
profile is a good thing to share. Yeah.
All right.
Nice plug. Thank you. I didn't even pay him for that. Like, that was.
I mean, as a founding member, we gotta.
All right. Thanks so much for wrapping that up, and let's transition now to the changelog. Taylor, what's changed?
Yeah, well, just real fast, because I don't want to
always say that.
Too heavy into it. I know, but I'm going to hit real high levels. So there were updates to webhook retry mechanisms. They dropped pretty significantly for those of you app devs, just something to be aware of. We're going to link up that in the changelog, but it went basically down to like 8 retries over 4 hours. This is down from like 20. Or it was like 19 plus. And so the idea being, that's just in general something to be aware of. I think most people probably know about this at this point. So we'll link up in docs and, some other breakdowns for that. The other thing that I thought really on the nose for Thomas, because he's on here, there's some fresh theme rows for the theme store homepage that actually made it to the changelog, which I thought was really interesting. But new criteria for top themes and new to the theme store were added. And I thought what was most interesting, I don't know, Thomas, if you have any insights to this or whatever, but like there wasn't necessarily criteria for quote unquote top themes. So I thought that was interesting. Like what do we mean by top? Because, the ones that were in there, I wouldn't say were ones that I've actually worked in a whole lot, that I just know because I am constantly checking the theme store for updates for other projects that I work in. But so top themes and then new to the theme store. New makes a lot of sense. Top, I don't know. Is that criteria that ever got communicated outside of like, hey, here's the changelog for this new stuff?
I have not. Funny enough, this podcast recording is conflicting with my meeting with my Shopify theme partner manager, which so I pushed that into 2:30 today. So if I had that, I probably can't say anything. I would be much more in the loop. I will be way more in the loop about this as of 2:30 today.
Okay. Well, I mean, if you can slack us, if there's anything you can actually do, we'll include in the notes there. But at least there's no publicly available criteria for a top theme that is making it into this new row on the homepage. It made it to the changelog, so significant enough change. It's in the changelog, but not necessarily something that was communicated as far as criteria. So other real quick point, built for Shopify criteria removal. That sounded, cool or big and scary, but it was basically because of some mobile performance using AppBridge for optimized loading on mobile devices is enabled by default. That's not necessarily a deprecation per se. It's just a general requirement at this point. So that's why it's not a BFS criteria anymore. So that's the changelog.
Thanks, Taylor. You always do such a good job with that. I appreciate it.
I feel like that was actually succinct, though, right? Like that
was.
I'm watching the clock. It was like 2 minutes. Okay, thank you. New record. Boom. Season 2. I'm actually going to be concise.
That's right. Well, speaking of concise, oftentimes we talk about what we've been working on, just have a chance to catch up on life. We've moved that now to the end of the talk, and we've already gone kind of long here, but I'd love to give a chance for Taylor or Thomas, myself, if there's anything you've been focused on recently that you are interested in sharing. I think big one in your life, maybe you're getting fiber optic installed in your neighborhood. I don't know.
They're not. So that reference, I know I just talked, but I guess I'll go since that was to me. I was complaining about bemoaning. I'm literally running this on my phone's hotspot right now because my internet's been knocked out probably 5 or 6 times this week from another internet provider is putting in fiber this week in our neighborhood. And so they keep knocking my internet out. It's been fine for 2 days. And of course, this morning it's been out in and out. So that has made things a little difficult. I've been able to work at the local coffee shop a little bit more than I typically do because of it. So I'm a little bit more caffeinated this week, maybe. As far as things that I'm working on, I've got a couple of just fun little projects that I haven't had to deal with. I was fighting storefront filtering a lot this week with some unique things, and so that I haven't actually had to deal with relatively recently. So I got to do a lot with that. And from a personal side of things, it's just my kids are 8 and 5, and so they are now old enough to be doing like local sports. And so my daughter's in soccer, my son's in flag football. So it's like one of those things where now it's like there's something every day after work and on the weekends. And so sometimes, you get done with the weekend, you're like, oh, now it's time for a break. The work week is almost my break now. It's nice though. There's the stability of kids out of summer, back in school. There's predictable schedules and routines. I am super grateful for that, at least though. So that's that's the gamut for me.
Such a nice shift.
Yes, huge,
Nice.
huge.
That's really interesting. My daughters are the same age. I've got 8 and 5 as well. So
Yeah, I remember our
fully
kids
on
were around the
board
same
with where
age.
you're
That's
at right
funny.
now.
Yeah.
I have kids too. They're similar in age as well. I mean, I didn't get the memo to wear the black T-shirt, all right, but at least I have kids that are roughly that age as well.
You know, I was supposed to wear my Archetype sweater. Now that I'm looking at this black T-shirt, this was supposed to go underneath my Archetype sweater.
The AI editing
Thank
skills
you
are going to
for
have to
point-
come into play here, Karl. You're up.
Yeah.
Oh
New
no, it's done
filter.
for then. For me, in terms of this week, life's been busy. It's good. I'm doing the same sports thing you guys are. Look at the calendar, be like, what happened to having free evenings? But from a coding standpoint, one little random thing I ran into interesting was trying to solve how to figure out if it was daylight savings time or not in Liquid. Turns out it's not a fun thing to do. So not impossible, but just one of those little gotchas.
That's a rabbit hole.
Yeah. Anytime date time stuff comes up, it's like, oh man,
Yeah.
whether it's JavaScript or something
yeah.
else.
Times and time zones are hard. Yeah.
Now Ruby has really good support for all this stuff. I'm just kidding. Okay, hard times. I've worked on my house a fair bit too. I still have some foundation issues I'm trying to address. So I've been. Luckily, we're in the middle of a big drought, so I haven't had any rain. So makes it easier to work around there. But it's also bad because I'm trying to grow grass. So don't do that. It's just a drought.
Hard.
How about you, Thomas? What you been focused on?
This week.
DevKit.
This week has been fun. I have a little Easter egg behind me. I don't I'm
picture?
terrible.
Yeah.
No.
I was like, a lamp. It's nice.
This little. Oh, wait.
I know it.
There's
He's
a-
the award.
I grab it.
He's gonna bring it in here. He's gonna bring it in here.
I've had so much fun with this thing right here.
What in the
I
world?
like
And-
the
and
Band-Aids.
in
That's
that-
a nice touch,
It's the arc. There's an arc. This all goes into, I think, one thing since I started nerding out over just video equipment and just video and filming stuff. It has always been an obsession with like, how can I get things set up in a way that I can just hit record and everything is what it needs to be so I can just send it out immediately? Like, how can I reduce the friction between recording and publishing, basically?
Mhm.
And where mobile, this is totally now aging millennial point of view of like where Gen Z mobile first video editing is at now is astonishing in terms of how quickly we were able to film like I think 15 or 20 videos and edit them. It was all on my phone.
Nice. That's awesome.
And like the resort, like the filter, the software is just so easy to use, and it was just so much fun and it was in and out in like 48 hours from
So
the point that we just.
I would say,
Yeah.
Karl, I don't know if you saw that. We will link that up in the show
I have
notes.
no
of
idea what you
course,
guys are
here.
talking about.
It is. So go to Twitter, Karl. Like Karl's not on Twitter, Thomas. I don't know. I can't. I keep
I'm
trying to tell
on
him.
Twitter. I just
He's-
don't hang out there all day because
He's
it's a
not on
cesspool.
Twitter. I mean,
So Archetype, we are the first theme partner in the theme store to pass 1,000 positive reviews on our theme Impulse.
wild.
The next
Congratulations.
runner-up is Style Hatch. They're in the 600s. And then after that, it's Maestro in the 500s. So we have a good lead there. And we're like, in July, it's like, oh, this is coming. We need to celebrate this. And we did the first pass of like, okay, we have a social post. And, oh, we're going to do like a giveaway. That's another, well, this can be too late by the time this airs, but you can get an Archetype sweater by sharing some social stuff.
Oh, now he's
and
going
then-
to Twitter. Did you hear the keyboard going?
Yeah,
Like, jeez,
free
man,
swag there.
jeez.
But I like how, and then I mail in my operations manager is just like, no, we got to make this big, and then we just started riffing, and there's still some other stuff to come. It's been a fun, you got to celebrate the wins. So it's been celebrating and just having fun with it this week.
That's awesome. Yeah, we'll link it all up, Karl. That's your homework for the day. You need to do that.
Well, I was listening to how much he likes to edit videos, and I'm thinking, Thomas, like, I'm looking for help editing this podcast.
I don't want to.
So.
Yeah, no, it's
different beast.
I'm the same. I love having. Ryan was hired in February, former Shopify, and he's just all on, like, having somebody who can just focus on content. He's brilliant with video. He's brilliant designer. He's got all the skills that you need just to. Yeah, I know I shouldn't be spending my time editing if I'm running this business correctly, even though, and I'm not that good of an editor. So let's leave it to the people who actually know what they're doing.
You're fine, Thomas. It's good enough for what we need. Thanks. Appreciate it. I'll send you the footage. You already recorded it, so you got what you need. No, it did occur to me just now that I did this wrong. We should have done picks of the week as part of your update, because that was the last thing I wanted to cover. So real quick, final thing, and then we'll close out. Pick of the week is just something interesting to you. Doesn't even have to be programming related. I'll go first. Polaris Dawn. It's for those of you following, it's that private SpaceX help mission. They had them a couple years ago. That was a fundraiser for St. Jude mainly and some science. This one, they're actually doing the first EVA. It happened yesterday, where two of the astronauts on board the SpaceX capsule, all private people, actually opened the capsule and stepped outside, took a look around, which is pretty amazing. So I'm a big space nerd. Went to space camp. Won a few awards at space camp. Practically an astronaut, really. So I follow this stuff, and it's pretty exciting to me. So congratulations to all the people involved with that. What a project. I mean, I write CRUD apps for a living, and they're in space. So, hey, there you go. Decisions were made.
The final frontier looks different for us all. That's right. Thomas, did you come up with one yet? You need more time.
Yeah, give me a second.
All right, I got one. I got you. I'll give you a couple more seconds, and I can talk as long as you need. So my pick of the week, I feel like we've had several illusions. I'm gonna drop some links in here for Archetype stuff or whatever. But Archetype has been doing this YouTube series on building an open source Shopify app. It's a wishlist app. So it's just on YouTube. It's a free open source thing. He's got a course and all this other stuff too, or what have you. But he's just doing this kind of building it live kind of type thing. So it's really cool to see in action as a theme dev who is trying to get further and further into the app space or what have you. It's pretty cool to watch and interact with that as well. So that would be my recommendation. I'd check that out. He does sessions usually on Saturdays, I think it is. So right in the middle of my kids playing games, of course. So I tend to miss it and have to watch later. So, but you should check it out if you can. So, Thomas.
All right, Thomas. That's
how about you?
Man.
You got it?
What's on my mind? I mean, I was just down the viral content train, and I would say if there's a source of inspiration, and I suspect this is going to be a growing trend. Have either of you heard of Clean Girl? If you haven't heard of Clean Girl, so this is she's on Instagram, maybe she's on TikTok, but there's a shift in content production where, okay, what you will know is, like, content for 5 or 8-year-olds on YouTube. It's got the kind of hokey, kind of children's music style thing, and there's the cheesy effects like the yay.
Yeah.
This generation is now approaching, the first of this generation is now teenagers and older.
Right.
That style of content is now transitioning into adults, like to an adult audience,
really,
which is really interesting to see. And I think Clean Girl is nailing it. It's just, if there's a random pick of the week, that's what's been on my radar, which is pretty funny.
We'll find that and link that up. We'll check. You said on it, is that Instagram you said?
Yeah. At Clean Girl.
Okay, I got you. Awesome.
Amazing. Well, society. Enough said. We don't have time to go into that. But Thomas, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks for the invitation.
Don't forget to approve me on LinkedIn, and we know how to reach you. We mentioned that earlier, but Thomas, basically all communication channels are open. So if you want to get in touch with Thomas, pursue him, find him. He will respond. And thanks for joining us. Thanks everyone for sticking around and listening. And we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.